What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Meta Monday on Tuesday here at Celio's Network. And today we're taking a look at a bunch of tournament results. There have been so many online tournaments with really great turnouts. So we're going to be taking a look at meta shares and the results from Top Cut from these online tournaments in the past week or so. I don't think I've gotten every tournament that's happened in the past week, but we have a good bit to look at, both meta shares and Top Cuts. So the Players' Cup tournaments are starting in 6 days for Players' Cup 2 if you are getting tickets on your PTCGO account for that. So I think this is a pretty good way to gauge what you'll be facing in those events, but I'll be talking more about Players' Cup stuff in future videos before the Players' Cup starts and also as the Players' Cup tournaments progress. But today we're looking at these meta shares and top cuts from recent online tournaments. Before we do, quick shout out to PotownStore.com, the best place for you to get PTCGO codes. Everything PTCGO you need, they should have it. And use code CELIO for 5% off. So we're going to start with the meta shares. I believe this should be Hexter Top Deck 10. Yes, it is. So let's take a look-see-do at this. We'll zoom in just a little bit here. Shouts out Hexter TCG for running awesome events. So this is the meta share from all the people that entered Hexter Top Deck 10, which was last Friday, I believe. I should know the date of it, but I don't. So what you'll notice here in these meta shares we're looking at, the recent trend is that ADPZ and Eternatus have been taking up the top 2 popularity spots in most of these tournaments, and also Mewtwo has been on a hard decline compared to the Hexter Top Deck 2 through 6 tournaments. But in this one, Centiskorch actually was the second most played deck. There were 30 Centiskorch, 41 ADPZ. So roughly 25% of the tournament was ADPZ, then like 20% Centiskorch, 10 to 15 Eternatus, and then down from there. But ADPZ, Centi, and Eternatus took up more than 50%, just those 3 decks put together. So I think we have entered a centralized meta looking at this tournament, and if the results from all of the ones we look at today match this, which, spoiler alert, they kind of do, I think we're in a more centralized meta now, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. There can be metas with just 4 decks to play, and the games are really fun and the format is healthy. So, but for metagaming purposes and deciding what you want to play, ADPZ, Centiskorch, and Eternatus taking up more than half of the field. You definitely want to be favored versus one of them, and maybe even to slightly unfavored versus the other 2. If you can be favored versus more than one of them, then that's really great if they're half of the field. But Centiskorch could have potentially seen a little bit of a spike here because of Alex Szymanski winning an Atlas tournament with his Scoop Up Net Centi, and I know people have been playing the Scoop Up Net Centi ever since then. And Centiskorch has been getting a lot of success recently, but it also got an accelerated, or not an elevated amount of play in the Hexter Top Deck 10. So note ADPZ and Eternatus and Centi, fairly popular. Luke Metal Z is on the decline, Mew 3 decks are on the decline, and Inteleon is definitely on the decline. These decks that were performing really well in the beginning, I even wrote an article on my Patreon about how Inteleon, Mew 3, and Luke Metal had really good matchup spreads like 2-ish weeks ago, and now they're all falling down, so this meta is really developing nicely because of these online tournaments. Alright, let's take a look at the other. Should have let me scroll to the next one, but maybe because I zoomed in I couldn't. So this is Hexter Top Deck 11 meta share. Yeah, let's zoom in again for this. That's likely why I couldn't scroll to the next one, because I had zoomed. So this is the next one. I guess if that tournament was Friday, then this tournament was this past... No, that tournament was last Monday, and this tournament is this past Friday. So this was on 9/18. And you'll see, again, ADPZ, Eternatus, Centiskorch taking up almost exactly half, just a little over half of the field. But Centiskorch has fallen way back down to only 12 people playing it, but still the 3rd most played deck. And like I said, Luca Metal, Mew 3, and Inteleon seeing definitely a lower amount of play than they had recently, and you'll start seeing this Rogue Tina Chomp deck pop up. And Torkoal also popped up a bit. My mom and I both played it. She got top 16, I got top 32 there. But these three decks are kind of taking up the tier 1, at least a popularity tier 1, ADPZ, Eternatus, and Sense Scorch. So Hexter Top Deck 12 meta. Here we go again. Now this one, also Hexter added decks with Crushing Hammer, 35 out of 160. But this one, Eternatus at over 25%, ADPZ at almost 25%, and Eternatus and ADPZ without Sense Scorch took up more than half of the field. By golly, we have a centralized meta here. And I would be shocked if you didn't hit at least one Eternatus, one ADPZ, or a deck just hard focused to counter them in the, in each of your Players' Cup events. I'd expect to see one Eternatus or one ADPZ at least. And then I wouldn't be surprised if you also see many decks hard countering them, like the Bird Trio deck or the Green's Tina Chomp deck. Maybe Inteleon hammers, or just things with hammers in general, because Eternatus is very weak to that. Torkoal V, which I think is good versus Eternatus, and in testing at least it's slightly favored versus ADPZ. So I think you're going to see something like this in your Players' Cup events, at least as of now, right? The Players' Cup events are going on every day on demand for almost a month straight, so the meta could definitely develop differently. But looking at this, over half of the meta here in a 150-ish player tournament, a 160 player tournament, having Eternatus and ADPZ be over half of the meta just really shows that the meta is developing and we're becoming centralized now. Let's look at these not backwards. So this was Atlas tournament, the Atlas mini tournament number 4. Shouts out Drayden Davis. I think he made this, or if he didn't make this, I got it off of his Twitter at Flying Corpses. But Atlas collectible tournaments, they're looking like they're pretty great so far. We'll see that this matches what we're looking at in the Hexter tournament shares. ADPZ, Eternatus, and Sense Scorch VMAX combined are taking up more than half of the meta, ADPZ and Eternatus being the top 2 played decks. And where is my arrow? There we go. This was the next Atlas mini. Again, ADPZ, Eternatus, and Sense Scorch taking up more than half of the meta. And that's what I'm really focusing on here, is that they're taking up a large chunk. And now we can actually look at what's doing well. That's very important. We can't just look at what's popular, right? So let's start over here, I think. Yeah, Hexter Top Deck 10. 173 players, Hexter Top Deck 10. This was the one where Sense Scorch was the second most played deck with 30 players on it. And ADPZ won this one. There was just a ton of Eternatus being successful, a ton of ADPZ being successful. A couple Mew 3 Welders still doing well, although the deck is not as popular. There were actually 4 Mew 3 Welders in the top 32 out of 173 players in this one. Excuse me. And like I said, Sense Scorch was the second most played deck. It was not very, very successful for this one. Still see Inteleon Frostmoth popping up at second place, another one popping up in top 32. Not heavily played, but still seeing some success. But ADPZ and Eternatus being very, very successful overall, and Mew 3 Welder having a nice top 32 conversion rate for not, I think there were 8 Mew 3 Welders in this tournament, so pretty good conversion rate there. This is from the Atlas Mini number 1 back on September 10th, but this is what kind of started the Sense Scorch VMAX scoop up net phenomena, because Alex Szymanski won this tournament with a new variation on Sense Scorch VMAX running Jirachis and scoop up nets, and I believe the Tina from Cosmic Eclipse, or no, from Unified Minds that removes a special energy. But other than that, the meta looked pretty normal. It was, honestly, the meta was normal, and the top 8 cut was normal. It was just that Alex came out with a new version of Centiskorch, with ADP getting second, Mew3 getting top 4 and 2 top 8 spots, Luke Metal Zacian getting top 4 and top 8, and then an Eternatus VMAX being in there top 8. And there were just about 70 people in this tournament. But yeah, Alex's list for this Centiskorch VMAX deck, you can find that on his Twitter. But I believe Cash has found success with a similar list, and someone that I think Alex said that he tested with also found success in another Atlas tournament with Centiskorch Scoop Up Nets. This is the Sunday Open from September 20th with over 100 players. I believe it might have been just under 100 players. I'm not sure if this was the junior and seniors combined, but we'll say about 100. Eternatus won this tournament, and nothing crazy happening with the results, really. It's not unheard of to see Decigoons popping up in top cut, Atelion Frostmoth, Mew3 Welder. Really nice spread of different decks finding success. And then the Tina Chomp deck, piloted by Gabriel Smart, that's been doing well. And this was, this is Atlas Mini 3 from September 20th. With 80 Masters and the same Centiskorch VMAX Scoop Up Net list winning again. So I really like to see that kind of consistency when we're talking about results. It makes them much more valid. And then nothing too crazy happening elsewhere. Pikarom did get a top 4, which is a little notable. This is the Pokex Alter Creation 4 with 35 players. Centiskorch winning it. That's 3 events we're talking about right now that Centiskorch VMAX has won. So Centiskorch just on an absolute tear. Next is the Pokex Last Chance Qualifier. Pikarom getting second, Eternatus getting first, Centiskorch in here, Cash getting 6th with it. 2 Pikaroms actually up here in second and top 8. A control deck by Wilmer Johansson at 9th. Pretty interesting to see that. And then Mew3 Weavile, so Dark Box by Tate Weitzel with Silvally and Weavile GX. Hexter Top Deck 11. Eternatus ended up winning it all. Mew3 and coming into second place, losing to Eternatus in the finals as it showed on paper. Mad Party is still getting a little bit of love in top 8. You'll see the Centiskorch Magneton variant at 9th, which is interesting. My mom, like I said, had gotten 11th with Torkoal, and I was also in there at 29th with Torkoal. Aaron Friedman playing Tina Chomp. So this one, Centiskorch VMAX did not win. Oh, Caleb Rogerson also with Tina Chomp, and Isaiah Bradner with Tina Chomp as well, so good bit of Tina Chomps happening. Centiskorch was not as successful for this one. Cool to see the Magneton variant there. But yeah, nothing crazy. I think like the best results to look at are honestly the meta shares and not so much what ended up winning. Unless there's things that are really off the wall that are winning, then you want to look at them and see why they're winning and how many were played. And then we have Cash winning with Centiskorch VMAX, so that's 4 times Centiskorch won. At least 3 of them I know were the Scoop Up Net variant. Decigoon's getting second. So here's exactly what I'm talking about. It's notable to look at Decigoons and say, why is it getting second in these huge tournaments still? Well, people still are not teching for it. Some decks just can't tech for it. So it can just get up to second place until it finally hits something like Centiskorch with Volcanions that it can't beat. Especially because it has Scoop Up Net in it, so they hit Volcanion once, you heal it, and you Welder, and then you smack them again with Volcanion. So, Decigoons, that's a really good example. I'm glad I was just talking about how, like, sometimes you want to look at what's doing well, sometimes you want to look at what's popular, sometimes you want to look at both. Decigoons just has to hit the matchups and the people who aren't teching for it, and honestly, not a lot of people are teching for it. And some decks, like I said, also just can't tech for it. Also note that Gabriel Smart got 11th with Green's Tina Chomp, Greena Chomp. There was a Rhyperior box in top 32, which, 5-3 record, not crazy impressive, but definitely worth noting that that deck got up there. Some more Greena Chomp. Nolan Benson, who got second with Inteleon VMAX 2 tournaments ago, got 20th here, so top 32 at 6-2. Consistent finishes with the Inteleon Frostmoth deck. Bunch of Eternatus, bunch of ADPZ. But ADPZ and Eternatus are completely beatable. And these results are showing that. So I hope you enjoyed this video overlooking the meta. Let me just pull up the popularity charts from Hexter 12 again for you real quick, but of course, go through the video, screenshot what you need from here. Shouts out to the people who made these lists, or the meta charts. But yeah, so Eternatus and ADPZ were very successful at the Hexter 12, but Sentiscorch ended up winning, and Desigoon ended up getting second. So like Desigoon, 1 out of 4 of them, only 4 people played it, but it still made it all the way up to second place. 8 people played Tina Chomp, 3 of them made top 32, I believe. And Sentiscorch taking that whole event. But important things to take away from this video: Eternatus and ADPZ are incredibly popular. Sentiscorch is kind of fluctuating, but not really dropping down from 3rd or 4th most popular deck, and it's also being very successful. Desigoon is still able to win tournaments and make it to finals, make it to top 8, because not a lot of people are teching for it, and some decks can't tech for it. And also note, Eternatus and ADPZ, they are completely beatable. Like, if they weren't beatable, then we would just have a tournament of all Eternatus and ADPZ. And maybe that would be a problem, but they are completely beatable. They're just very consistent, very refined decks. And Mew3 Welder dropping is something I talked about 2-3 weeks ago when Mew3 Welder was really doing well. I had mentioned that Mew3 Welder potentially was doing so well because it was a deck which had previously been refined, and so people could take it into post-rotation, just replacing some cards, knowing how it played, knowing how to build it, knowing how what you needed to do to beat certain decks. And it had previous experience and player knowledge already going into post-rotation, whereas things like Sentiscorch and Eternatus and Inteleon might have been newer to players. Eternatus and Sentiscorch were definitely very new because they just came out in Darkness Ablaze, and Inteleon honestly had some of the surprise factor coming into the post-rotation. So where Mew3 Welder was previously refined already, Inteleon had some surprise factor because people weren't necessarily prepared for it quite yet. And then Luke Metal, the double Zamazenta and triple Zamazenta were taking people off guard, and their decks were not ready to combat that yet. And Luke Metal also might have been doing well against some decks that were being played more heavily. ADPZ without Tool Scrapper was a much easier matchup than ADPZ with Tool Scrapper, so if that becomes the norm, which I do think there was a time in the past 2 weeks where more people were playing Tool Scrapper than not, but I think people are more aggressive now with ADPZ. But just really cool to watch how the meta develops and how Luke Metal and Inteleon and Mew3 Welder, which had really great matchup spreads and were performing really well 2-3 weeks ago, now they're being teched for and prepared for and played in smaller numbers, and Eternatus and ADPZ are kind of the top dogs now. So we had that counter meta kind of dominating a bit, and now we have the centralized meta of the tier 1 Eternatus and ADPZ, with Sentiscorch just slightly behind, performing really, really well, and some new rogue decks are popping up, like the Green's Tina Chomp, the Green's Bird Trio, the Hydreigon Dark Boxes, the Weavile GX Dark Boxes. So cool, very cool to see other things popping up. Also Torkoal V, shouts out Torkoal, wrote an article about that on my Patreon if you're interested. That came out a couple days before my mom and I played at the Hexter tournament. So yeah, still plenty of creativity left. You'll notice that the rogue decks coming out are usually favored versus Eternatus and ADPZ, or favored versus one and even to another, like Greenachomp, Bird Trio, Torkoal V. So that's all I have for you today. Hope you enjoyed this. Always go to PotownStore.com for your PTCGO needs. Use code Celio for 5% off. If you're not already subbed to the channel, make sure you slap that subscribe button and consider giving me a thumbs up so this video can reach more new viewers. It really does help me out. Sorry to beg for the thumb. I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.